Morning and happy Groundhog Day to everyone. I should report that Wyatt and Willie and I tend to go with the Canadian sources as opposed to those elsewhere, has predicted an early spring, and I think that'll come as good news to people after what hasn't been a very long winter, quite frankly, but I guess it seems long because of the pandemic. And from my own experience being in Wyerton many years on Groundhog Day, when I was in provincial politics, I can be confident in saying that the amount of fun to be had and the amount of liquid refreshment consumed has no relationship to what the forecast is made by Wyerton Willie, but he did forecast an early spring, so I guess that's good. The City Council meets today for the first time in 2021. There are about 100 items on the agenda today, but I want to focus on the two that I have designated as my two key items, the first being the Community Safety and Crisis Response Program, and the second being the report on SmartTrack. The report going to Council today recommends the approval of 4 Community Safety and Crisis Support Service pilots. These pilots would be in Northwest Toronto, Northeast Toronto, and the Downtown East, with a 4th pilot serving Indigenous communities. These pilot programs would allow for a non-police-led response for non-emergency, non-violent calls, including those involving persons in distress, and for wellness checks. The intention is that these mental health professionals will be the first responders. The pilots respond to City Council's direction to City staff given in June 2020 and shows that we are continuing to move forward with the promised reforms. This is a step in the right direction. These pilots are being done in the right way with the best advice from our professional staff, and they will help Toronto residents who are experiencing in their lives a non-violent crisis. These are the first important steps along the road to having these calls for people in distress answered by professionals other than the police. Toronto Police respond to about 30,000 calls from people in crisis every year. This change will not only see mental health professionals applying their skills and training to incidents that will be a better answer, but it will also in turn allow police to focus on other priorities such as violent crime. In calling for Council to approve this program, the Toronto Star editorial board called this the first step to ending tragic deaths. They referred to it as an important beginning. I agree with that, and I hope Council, after some debate, will also agree. I will be proposing at Council a more rapid timetable, understanding the care which must be taken on an initiative like this, which has its complexities. And I will also be proposing today a full-scale review of the governance and operation of 911. And the reason for that is because, one of the reasons in any event, is because the taking and dispatching of distress calls has a lot to do with how they're handled overall. It starts at the beginning, which often is a phone call. Today's vote on the SmartTrack report will ensure that SmartTrack continues to move forward. The result will be more transit to move more people sooner inside the City of Toronto. City staff confirm that the SmartTrack stations discussed in the report are projected to be completed by 2026, which is well ahead of the Ontario subway lines and the additional transit that will bring. So this will be the first significant transit addition in terms of new stops after the opening of the Eglinton Crosstown. These SmartTrack stations will be the next significant group of new transit stations to open inside the City of Toronto after the opening of the Eglinton Crosstown. Every single new transit station inside the City of Toronto offers more accessibility, more transit to Torontonians, and gives them a new reason to leave their cars at home. The report demonstrates that there is a mutual understanding between the City of Toronto and the province that Toronto needs transit now. It needs that transit as soon as possible to be finished and open as soon as possible. And I am committed to doing everything we can in cooperation with the other governments to get people moving across the city. Progress combating climate change absolutely depends on making investments like this in more transit and actually getting more transit built. These stations will soon be under construction. So I look forward to today's discussions on the 100 items on the agenda of the City Council, and I'm now happy to answer your questions on these items that I've discussed or any others of interest to you.
Thanks everybody for joining us. As a reminder, it's one question, one follow-up. First up, we'll have Ashley Legasic. Ashley, can you please unmute yourself?
Hi there. Thank you for taking my question. Mayor Tory, I note that there's a motion going before council today that, if approved, would see the City of Toronto request from the federal government the assistance of the military in long-term care homes. Are you going to support this motion?
Well, the motion per se doesn't request the federal government to send the military, because that's the provincial government's jurisdiction to do that. It merely says that all hands should be on deck to help our frail elderly people in any way that we can. I've consistently adopted the position when asked this question that any resources that are going to help make life better, that are going to help save lives, that are going to help keep our elderly citizens who are in our care better looked after and in fact healthier is something that I would support. I think we should make sure it's all hands on deck, and we do everything we possibly can to care for these frail elderly citizens who are in long-term care.
Thank you. And Mayor Tory, we have seen a decline in the number of new cases. So you have spoken about the fact that it is time to start planning for a reopening. First of all, I'm wondering if those discussions have started between the city and the province. And this time around, what needs to be done different to make a reopening safe and successful?
Well, I think the reopening the last time, if you look at the numbers, actually worked fairly well. It was a staged reopening after a shutdown. And if you look at what the kinds of case count numbers were, say at the end of the summer, when things were fully reopened, they weren't too bad at all. They weren't down to zero, which is where we would all like this, but I think they were certainly well down. And one of the points that I've made is that even with the decline that's taken place during this current lockdown, there has been a significant decline, but it is nowhere near back to the kinds of numbers we saw in the late summer of 2020. So I think we have to keep that in mind and stay the course in terms of what we're doing now to keep ourselves safe and to stop the spread of this virus. And that means staying at home and avoiding contact with other people, wearing masks, and so on. With regard to the discussions, I can just tell you I had a very excellent discussion about the need for a comprehensive, well thought through, well consulted upon plan with a minister of the provincial government on the weekend, and that I can assure you that consideration has started to be given to those things, albeit that we're not there yet. And I can tell you as well that our medical officer of health and her team have been involved in discussions with the province about some of these matters already. But we still have some distance to go, I think, before we're looking at any kind of widespread reopening.
Thanks, Ashley. Next up, we have Matt Bingley from Global. Matt, if you can just unmute yourself, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, Mayor. I'm just wondering, when it comes to the possibility of variant spread, that conversation you said you had with your provincial counterpart, do you feel that they adequately addressed the idea of variants of concern? And I'm just wondering how concerned you are about how variants could potentially derail reopening for the city.
When you see the apparent speed at which variant cases have been able to move, obviously this has to be a source of deep concern, and I know it is for all the health officials, and I'm sure for the provincial people as well. I will only tell you that my discussions are principally with our medical officer of health, because I will ask her in pretty well every one of our meetings, are we doing everything that we should or could be doing in order to address this? And those discussions suggest that we are doing the things we should be doing. The steps she took to communicate with all the different agencies and organizations out there, asking them to redouble their efforts on disinfection and on different safety measures, certainly have me confident that as much as is known about this, that we're responding to that in the proper manner. Whether it will affect the timetable for the reopening remains to be seen. Some of the projections we saw a week or so ago suggested that the real impact of the variants, depending on how they can be managed, would be felt in the month of March, not so much now. And so I just think what we have to do is stay the course, follow the advice of our medical officer of health to redouble our efforts with regard to following the rules, disinfection, keeping distance, wearing masks, not socializing with others, staying home. And that offers us, as of the moment, the best chance to deal effectively with the variant and with the virus overall.
Thank you. Just on the Belmont Meats outbreak, now that this is in the workplace, I'm wondering how much of a concern it is that that a variant has made its way into the workplace, and if you've had an opportunity to speak with the Ministry of Labour about it.
I have not spoken myself with the Ministry of Labour, but again, I know that one of the focuses of Dr. Davila and her team at the Toronto public health is to address all workplaces and make sure that whether it's the virus itself, the original COVID-19, or any variant thereof, that those don't make their way into the workplace, and that we find ways to make sure that employees are kept safe, and that we stop community spread and stop spread within workplaces. And we discussed that again this morning, just within the context of making sure that we are doing everything and that the Ministry of Labor is doing everything through all of their inspections and other measures to make sure that people are kept safe. And I think this is a constant source of preoccupation, will continue to be. The numbers will tell the tale as to how effective that we're all being at trying our best, together with the cooperation of people. I mean, again, when you really delve into these things, as we saw in Peel, for example, with some of the numbers, we see that the absence of sick pay actually causes people, and they measured it out of their contact tracing. I asked about this morning. They measured a substantial number of people who not only went to work feeling sick with symptoms of COVID-19, in some cases, people went to work having tested positive. And while their motives aren't listed in the reports that we've seen from Peel, you can imagine that in some cases they did that because they were afraid of losing their paycheck and not being able to feed their families. And so there's a whole suite of things that we have to all do together, including inspections by the Ministry of Labor, including the kind of advice that our medical officer of health has given to workplaces and to employers, and including common sense on the part of employees not to socialize with each other in the workplace, which often has been found to be a source of the spread. You go to the lunchroom, take your mask off to eat, and sit in too close quarters with some of your fellow employees. So there's a big job to be done here to manage the virus itself and to manage the spread of the variants, and it requires a staying of the course at least for a considerable additional period of time to get these numbers down.
Thanks, Matt. Next up, we have Natalie Johnson from CTV. Go ahead.
Good morning, sir. I just wanted to ask about SmartTrack. I know you've said before that SmartTrack as it is now isn't an apples to apples comparison with how it was first pitched when you were running for mayor, because there are new provincial lines at play. But on a personal level, are you disappointed that your signature plan that you had such high hopes for during your campaign has been whittled away over the years?
I'm happy about the fact that something that I believe I started as a candidate for mayor in 2014, which was to get a lot more transit built in Toronto to serve some of the areas that were underserved and to connect people to jobs, which if you go back and look was one of the principal things that we were trying to do, connect people to opportunity. Those things are happening. So whether the western dozen or so stops that are now going to form part of the Eglinton West LRT are built by a provincial line that actually is an LRT as opposed to running on GO train lines, or are built as a GO train SmartTrack line, to me is immaterial. We're getting the transit. And today we're moving forward with 5 new transit stations within the city of Toronto. If you think about that, that's almost as big as the extension that was opened a couple of years ago to great fanfare of the University Spadina subway line. This is a big expansion of transit availability inside the city of Toronto. And that was the great opportunity that SmartTrack represented. An opportunity to take existing rail lines, so you could do it faster, and put more stations inside the city of Toronto in place so that people could get on transit inside the city of Toronto and go somewhere else inside the city. And so that will be happening. That is happening together with all of the Ontario subway projects, and I'm happy about this. And I intend, furthermore, to move forward with the Eglinton East Scarborough LRT and waterfront transit just as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you. And just to follow up, a CTV News investigation by my colleague John Woodward revealed that about 1,500 short-term Airbnb listings display license codes that don't match the ones handed out by city staff. In your opinion, is Airbnb doing enough to ensure that its hosts are following the rules?
I think there is more effort needed on our part. We've moved now from an educational kind of posture to an enforcement posture, and on the part of Airbnb itself, because the intention here was to, yes, allow for short-term rentals by owners to continue, owners who actually resided in the apartment, but to make other apartments and housing units available to longer-term renters, because we're short of housing in the city of Toronto. And so I think that all of us have to move together now to make sure that the new regulations are complied with, and this is in the best interests of a greater supply of rental housing, but also in the best interests of neighborhood compatibility, because we had a lot of complaints from instances where neighborhoods and buildings were upset by the presence of parties that were going on a transient basis night after night.
Thanks, Natalie. Next up, we have Momin from 680. Go ahead, Momin.
Yeah, good morning, sir. In November, when the provincial government tabled its budget, it promised to offer municipalities the power to offer some sort of tax relief to small businesses. Yesterday, there was a few councillors who said they're bringing a motion to council this week to ask the province to come forward with what those regulations will be soon, because it needs to be part of the budget or it won't be included in this year's budget. Will you support that motion, and do you have those similar concerns?
I moved a motion at the executive committee, which forms part of the report coming to the council from the executive committee, suggesting that we move forward. But one of the first things we have to do is actually talk to small business about how this new tax bracket is going to work, because there are various suggestions out there, including that you do it by way of a rebate. Others that sort of have differing opinions about where you draw the line on what's a small business and what isn't. And so this is not without its complexities, but the first thing we need, and I do strongly agree with this, is we need the provincial regulations. And I know they're working very hard to get those done as soon as they can. And once we have those in hand, we can proceed forward. But we can't do very much without those regulations. And I'm sure they're forthcoming in the immediate future.
If you don't get it in time to squeeze into this year's budget by the 18th, will it have to wait until next year?
Well, the work has to get done, and the work has to get done of consulting. You know, some of the very same people who would rush these things forward and or suggest they would, in a matter of hours, are the very same people who will complain if you don't have consultation. And I think, sure, we could identify the fact that small businesses have had such trouble during the pandemic that they need relief as soon as they can get it. But if we did it in too hasty a manner and didn't take account of all the questions that have to be answered to do this properly, we'd be criticized for that. So the bottom line is that we will do this as soon as we can. I'm seized of the fact that small business needs this relief. That's why the province offered it at our urging. But it starts with the provincial regulations, which hopefully will come as soon as possible, and then we'll move forward.
Okay, thanks, Momin. Next up, we have Mark McAllister from City News. Go ahead, Mark. Mark, do you have a question? You just need to unmute yourself. Okay, we'll move on to Jamie Goodfriend from CP24. Go ahead, Jamie. Just remember to unmute yourself. Jamie, do you have a question? You'll just need to unmute yourself. If you're on your phone, you might need to press *66. Okay, there you go. Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys. Hi, Mayor. I got a question to you in regards to CafeTO. You know, while many of these cafes, while the program allowed many business owners to expand their patios and increase revenue, the reality is many of these business owners and patio owners spent thousands of dollars, even tens of thousands of dollars, retrofitting their patios, buying expensive heaters, plexiglass dividers, only for the program to really be dwindled down, especially because of the lockdown measures. And the reality is many of these restaurant owners won't survive. Are there any other rebates or programs that you're looking at including into the CafeTO? Because the reality is a lot of these new business owners, many of them don't even qualify for some of the provincial benefits, and many of them are obviously in a very difficult situation. Any changes to CafeTO moving forward?
I will just say that we're trying to make CafeTO bigger and better this year, better by making sure, for example, people can, without a lot of extra paperwork, build platforms and decks, that the season will start sooner. It started, I think, well into June last year. This year it'll start in early May. And we're making sure that as many people as possible, including in some of the areas not really covered very effectively last year, can participate in this program. The business assistance programs in the main are going to have to come from the other governments that have the sources of money to fund those. And there is a loan program from a provincial government that's quite robust and that has had 65,000 applications, I think, so far. And there's, of course, the programs from the federal government that have to do with rent and wage subsidies. And so we strongly support those and their continuation. We will roll out CafeTO and make sure it's available to a wider group of people across the city in more areas, and that we make it easy to apply, start the season earlier, and allow for things like platforms and decks, which I think will really help. And we'll try to stay the course in terms of not having another shutdown. Obviously, nobody wants another shutdown of any kind at any time. That's going to depend on how well we deal with the case counts and other factors that have to do with the pandemic.
And just follow up, weather permitting, it says that the program could start as early as May 8th. Weather permitting, do you think that we could maybe see that program opening up even earlier?
I've spoken to the Transportation Services Department. They are the department of the city that really will help us determine that. They have a lot of work to do in the post-winter period. And as you know, we can have snowstorms into April, but then they have to clean up the streets and get all of the kind of leaves and other things out of the catch basin so that when we have summer storms, we don't have flooding. So they have said they can get that work done by May the 8th. I have asked, and there's a motion, in fact, that's part of the report coming to City Council today, that we have every one of these CafeTO installations available to be open for business not later than the May 2-4 weekend. If we can do better than that, I'm sure they will. But there are some very practical things they have to do to have the city run properly, to be safe, and to stop flooding, for example, from occurring. And that's work that will get done just as quickly as possible.
And we'll just check with Mark McAllister one more time. Mark, do you want to unmute yourself if you have a question? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sure. I didn't initially have anything planned, but I will follow up, Mayor Tory, on what you had said about the community safety program off the top. You said you had planned on asking for a more rapid timeline. Do you have a timeline in mind and when you'd like to get this started?
Much sooner than 2026, which was a date that was originally speculated upon for full implementation. And what I've asked for, just because I think, again, for us to set arbitrary deadlines when you're dealing with something as sensitive and as complex as making sure we have a network of mental health professionals in place to deal with thousands and thousands of calls from people in distress, and when you're talking about how that ties into 911 and a whole host of other things, you have to do these things with a degree of care. But I certainly felt that 2026 was too long a period of time. So we've asked for a report by the end of this year on how we can speed that timetable up with the learning of the pilot projects in hand. And so I'm confident that they can come back, our excellent city staff working in conjunction with mental health experts and others with a date that is sooner than that. I just want it as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you very much.